The first time Lucas heard the soft whimpering, he thought it was the wind. The December air carried a crisp chill, rustling through the bare branches of the trees lining the quiet suburban street. He pulled his coat tighter around him, stepping carefully along the cracked sidewalk, his breath forming small clouds in front of him. School had just let out, and he had taken his usual shortcut through the alley behind the old grocery store. It was a path he knew well, littered with fallen leaves and the occasional discarded soda can. But today, something was different. The sound was unmistakable now, faint but persistent, coming from the narrow gap between two overflowing trash bins. Lucas hesitated, glancing around to see if anyone else had noticed, but the street was empty. He crouched down and peered into the shadows. Two tiny eyes, round and dark, stared back at him. The creature was curled up tightly, its thin body trembling. A puppy, or at least it looked like one. Its fur was dirty and matted, a mix of deep brown and hints of silver. It let out another weak whimper, barely moving. "Hey, buddy," Lucas murmured, reaching out slowly. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The little animal shrank back, pressing itself against the cold brick wall. Lucas bit his lip. He couldn't just leave it there. It was freezing, and the poor thing looked like it hadn't eaten in days. He reached into his backpack, fingers brushing against the half-eaten granola bar from lunch. It wasn't much, but maybe it would help. He unwrapped it and broke off a small piece, setting it on the ground just a few inches away. The tiny creature sniffed the air cautiously. Its nose twitched, but it didn't move. Lucas sighed. "Come on, it's food. You gotta be hungry, right?" A moment passed, then another. Finally, the puppy, or whatever it was, stretched its neck forward, hesitating before grabbing the food with its tiny teeth. Lucas watched, his heart squeezing at the sight of it eating so desperately. He could see its ribs beneath the dirty fur. "All right, let's get you out of here," he said softly, reaching out again. This time, the creature didn't pull away as quickly. Slowly, carefully, Lucas scooped it up. It was lighter than he expected, barely more than skin and bones. It shivered violently in his hands, burrowing into the warmth of his jacket. He held it close as he stood up, looking around once more before heading home. His mom was going to flip. They weren't supposed to bring animals home. His dad had allergies, and she always said pets were too much responsibility. But how could he just leave it? It wouldn't survive another night out in the cold. By the time he reached his house, the little creature had nestled against his chest, its breathing slow and steady. Lucas hesitated on the porch, adjusting his grip before pushing open the front door. The warmth of the house hit him immediately, carrying the familiar scent of homemade chili. "Mom, I need you to not freak out," he called, closing the door behind him. From the kitchen, his mother appeared, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Why would I—" "Lucas Thomas Carter, what is that in your jacket?" Lucas took a deep breath. "I found it in the alley. It was freezing and starving. I couldn't just leave it." His mother frowned, stepping closer. "Honey, we've talked about this. We can't keep a pet. Your dad—" "I know," Lucas interrupted. "I know. But I'm not asking to keep it. Just let it stay the night. Just one night. Please, Mom, look at it." She sighed, crossing her arms. Her eyes softened as she took in the sight of the trembling bundle in his arms. "Fine, one night, but first thing in the morning, we're taking it to the vet." Relief flooded Lucas. "Thank you. I swear I'll take care of it." He hurried upstairs to his room, carefully setting the little creature on his bed. It curled up instantly, letting out a contented sigh. He sat beside it, watching as it relaxed for the first time. "What are you, little guy?" he murmured, brushing a gentle hand over its fur. It looked so much like a puppy, but something about it felt different. The shape of its ears, the way its eyes gleamed in the dim light. He couldn't quite place it. For now, it didn't matter. All that mattered was that it was safe. Tomorrow they'd go to the vet. Tomorrow they'd figure it out. But for tonight, he would make sure it felt warm, fed, and finally loved. Lucas barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, his mind raced with questions about the little creature curled up in a nest of blankets on his bed. He kept expecting it to wake up, to whimper or move around, but it slept soundly, its breathing deep and steady. He couldn't help but stare at it, studying the way its fur shone faintly in the glow of his bedside lamp. There was something strange about it, something he couldn't quite put into words. But it didn't matter, not yet. What mattered was that it was here, safe and warm. Morning came too soon. His alarm buzzed, but he had been awake long before it rang. He shut it off quickly, not wanting to startle the little creature. It stirred slightly at the noise, blinking open dark eyes that seemed too deep, too knowing for a puppy. Lucas hesitated before reaching out, running a hand gently over its back. "Morning," he whispered. The creature blinked up at him, making a soft noise that sounded almost like a chirp. Lucas chuckled. Not much of a barker, huh? A knock at his door made him jump. "Lucas?" His mom's voice was muffled through the wood. "Get dressed, we need to leave soon." "Okay," he called back. He looked down at the little animal. "Guess we better get going." He quickly got dressed, then carefully wrapped the small creature in a towel. It didn't struggle, just nestled into the warmth and let out a soft sigh. Lucas held it close as he headed downstairs, where his mom was already putting on her coat. "Are you sure you don't want breakfast first?" she asked as she grabbed her keys. "I'm good," Lucas said. His stomach felt too tight with nerves anyway. His mom sighed. "All right, let's get this little guy checked out." The vet clinic was only a 10-minute drive away, but it felt much longer. Lucas kept glancing down at the small creature in his lap, watching its tiny chest rise and fall. It seemed so calm, as if it trusted him completely. The thought made something warm bloom in his chest. When they arrived, his mom signed them in at the front desk, while he found a seat in the waiting area. A few other people were there holding leashes or pet carriers. A woman across from him had a golden retriever that wagged its tail and sniffed the air in Lucas's direction. The little creature in his arms stayed completely still, watching everything with careful eyes. A few minutes later, a vet tech called them back. Lucas followed her into a small exam room where she gestured for him to place the creature on the table. "What do we have here?" she asked, smiling as she put on gloves. "I found him in an alley," Lucas said. "He was cold and starving, so I took him home." She nodded, reaching out to gently feel along the creature's body. "He's very thin," she murmured. "You did the right thing bringing him in." Lucas felt a swell of relief. He watched as she checked its ears, eyes, and paws. But as she continued her exam, her brows slowly knitted together. She stepped back slightly, glancing at Lucas, then at his mom. "I'm going to have the doctor take a look," she said. "Just a moment." Lucas frowned. "Is something wrong?" The tech hesitated. "I just want to confirm something." "Hang tight." She left the room and Lucas turned to his mom, his heart pounding. That was weird, right? His mom didn't answer right away, but he could see the concern on her face. A few moments later, the vet came in. He was an older man with glasses perched on the edge of his nose. He offered a reassuring smile as he stepped up to the exam table. "Let's have a look." Lucas watched anxiously as the vet examined the little creature, feeling along its spine, checking its teeth. But then the vet did something unexpected. He pulled back, studying it with an expression Lucas couldn't read. Finally, the vet looked up. "Lucas, this isn't a dog." The words didn't register at first. "What?" "This isn't a dog," the vet repeated, glancing at Lucas's mom. "I don't know exactly what it is yet, but it's not a puppy." Lucas felt the blood drain from his face. "But it looks like one." The vet nodded. "Yes, at first glance it does, but look closer." Lucas did. He took in the shape of the ears, the slight slant of the eyes, the strange patterns in its fur. Now that the vet pointed it out, he realized it wasn't quite right. But if it wasn't a puppy, then what was it? His mom cleared her throat. "So, what does that mean?" The vet sighed. "Well, first I'd like to run a few tests. I want to make sure it's healthy. Would that be all right?" Lucas hesitated. He didn't want to let go of the little creature, not even for a second, but he nodded. "Okay, good." The vet's expression softened. "You did a good thing bringing it here. We'll take care of it." Lucas swallowed hard. "Can I stay?" The vet smiled. "Of course. Why don't you wait in the lobby for a bit? We'll call you back soon." Lucas nodded and reluctantly handed over the little creature. It let out a small noise but didn't struggle as the vet carried it away. Lucas watched until they disappeared through a door, then turned to his mom. "What if it's dangerous?" she asked quietly. Lucas shook his head. "It's not. It's just different." His mom sighed, rubbing her temples. I don't know, Lucas. I just don't want you getting attached if... I already am, he admitted. I don't care what it is. It needs me. She looked at him for a long moment before nodding. All right, we'll see what the tests say. Lucas sat down in the waiting area, staring at the door where the vet had gone. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't giving up on it. Lucas sat in the waiting area, tapping his foot against the tiled floor. Minutes dragged on like hours. Every time the clinic door opened, his head snapped up. But it was never the vet coming to call him back. His mom sat beside him, scrolling through her phone, but he could tell she wasn't really focused on it. She was worried, just like he was. The weight in his chest grew heavier with each passing minute. What if something was wrong? What if the little creature was sick? Or worse, what if the vet decided it had to go to some animal research facility? The thought made his stomach turn. Finally, the door opened and the vet stepped out. His face was calm, but there was something in his expression that made Lucas's heart pound faster. You can come back now, the vet said, motioning them inside. Lucas and his mom stood quickly, following him down the hall to the same small exam room. The little creature was sitting on the table now, wrapped in a soft blanket. It perked up as soon as it saw Lucas, making a tiny chirping sound that sent a wave of relief washing over him. He hurried forward, reaching out to stroke its fur. It nuzzled against his hand, and his throat tightened. It's okay, buddy, he murmured a masuraisa. The vet cleared his throat, drawing Lucas's attention. I ran a few tests, he said, checked its vitals, took some blood, and even ran a day analysis. The results are unusual. Lucas's stomach clenched. What do you mean? The vet hesitated. It shares some genetic markers with canines, but it's not a dog. In fact, I'm not sure it belongs to any recognized species. Silence hung in the air. Lucas stared at him, trying to process the words. What? The vet sighed. There are traits here that don't match any known animal. It's as if it's something new entirely. Lucas's mom let out a small, nervous laugh. You're saying my son found an undiscovered species in an alleyway? The vet shook his head. I don't know, but I do know that it's not dangerous. It's small, malnourished, and scared, but it trusts Lucas. That much is clear. Lucas looked down at the little creature. It gazed up at him with wide, unblinking eyes, its tiny body relaxing under his touch. A lump formed in his throat. So what happens now? Lucas asked quietly. The vet folded his arms. Technically, if this were a new species, it should be reported to wildlife authorities, but he hesitated. Something tells me that wouldn't be the best thing for it. Lucas's heart thudded. You mean? The vet gave a small, knowing smile. I mean, I think it belongs with you. Lucas's breath caught. Really? His mom frowned. Are you sure that's safe? The vet nodded. I've seen nothing that suggests it's a threat. It's not aggressive, it's bonded with Lucas. And honestly, I don't know if it would survive being taken somewhere else. Lucas looked at his mom pleadingly. Please, Mom, I'll take care of it. I promise, she sighed, rubbing her temples. This is a lot, Lucas. I know, he said quickly, but this is different. It's not just about wanting a pet. It needs me. His mom was quiet for a long moment, then she sighed again. All right, but you are fully responsible for it. That means feeding, cleaning, and whatever else it needs. Lucas grinned. I will, I swear. The vet handed him a small bag of food and some basic supplies. Start with this. I'll schedule a follow-up appointment in a couple of weeks to see how it's doing. Lucas nodded eagerly, carefully lifting the tiny creature into his arms. It immediately curled up against his chest, letting out a contented sigh. He couldn't believe it. He got to keep it. Whatever it was his now. The drive home felt like a dream. He held the little creature the entire way, barely able to take his eyes off it. He couldn't stop smiling. When they got home, he brought it up to his room, setting it down gently on his bed. It blinked up at him, then stretched out on the blankets, as if claiming the space as its own. Lucas chuckled. Guess you were making yourself comfortable. The little creature made a soft sound, almost like a purr. Lucas sat beside it, running a hand along its back. I should give you a name, he mused. Something special. He thought for a moment, then grinned. How about Nova? You're definitely something out of this world. The creature tilted its head, then let out a small chirp as if approving. Nova it is, Lucas said, his heart swelling. He had no idea what the future held, but one thing was certain. His life had just changed forever. Lucas spent the rest of the day with Nova, observing every little movement and reaction. The way its tiny ears twitched at every unfamiliar sound, the way it tilted its head in curiosity when he spoke to it, the way it stretched out across his bed like it had always belonged there. He couldn't shake the feeling that Nova was more than just special. It was something entirely different, something unique. His mom checked on him periodically, peeking into his room with wary eyes, but she didn't say much. It was clear she still had her doubts. Lucas couldn't blame her. It wasn't every day someone brought home a mystery creature and decided to keep it. By dinner time, Nova had nestled itself in the pile of blankets Lucas had set up on his bed, its tiny body rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. He hesitated before leaving it, not wanting to disturb its sleep, but his stomach rumbled loudly, reminding him that he hadn't eaten all day. Quietly, he slipped out of his room and headed downstairs. His mom was already at the dining table, setting down plates of spaghetti. His dad sat across from her, flipping through a newspaper. The smell of garlic bread filled the air, making Lucas's stomach grumble again. "You finally decided to come down," his mom said, eyeing him as he sat down. "I was starting to think you'd locked yourself in your room for the rest of the night." Lucas shrugged, just making sure Nova was okay. His dad lowered the newspaper, raising an eyebrow. "Nova? That's what I named it," Lucas said, twirling spaghetti around his fork. His dad sighed. "I still think we should have called animal control. We don't even know what that thing is." Lucas's stomach twisted. "Dad, it's not a thing, it's Nova. And the vet said it wasn't dangerous." His dad shook his head. "That doesn't mean we know what we're dealing with." His mom placed a hand on his dad's arm. "We agreed to let Lucas take care of it, remember?" His dad grunted but didn't argue further. Lucas focused on his food, not wanting to push the subject any more than necessary. After dinner, he hurried back upstairs, eager to check on Nova. When he opened the door, he was relieved to see it still curled up in the blankets, fast asleep. He tiptoed inside, closing the door softly behind him, and sat on the edge of the bed. Nova stirred slightly, stretching its small limbs before blinking up at him. It let out a tiny noise, not quite a bark, not quite a chirp. Lucas smiled, reaching out to gently scratch behind its ears. "You feeling better?" he murmured. Nova let out a small huff, then nuzzled against his hand. The warmth of it against his skin made something deep in his chest tighten. He had only known Nova for a day, but it already felt like they belonged together. For the next few hours, Lucas kept a close eye on Nova, noting the way it moved, how it reacted to different sounds, what it liked and didn't like. He tried giving it the special food the vet had given him, and to his relief, Nova ate eagerly. Its appetite reassured him. It was getting stronger. As the night stretched on, Lucas found himself lying back against his pillows, Nova curled up beside him. He stared at the ceiling, mind racing with everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. Finding Nova in the alley, the vet's strange words, the realization that Nova wasn't a normal puppy. But none of that mattered as much as one simple fact. Nova needed him, and he wasn't going to let it down. The next morning, Lucas woke up to a strange sensation. Something warm and small resting against his neck. He blinked his eyes open to find Nova curled up on his pillow, pressed against him like a tiny living heater. Lucas grinned, resisting the urge to move too much so he wouldn't wake it. He had no idea what today would bring, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Lucas spent most of the morning observing Nova. He noticed small things, how it stretched like a cat when it woke up, how its eyes seemed almost too intelligent when it looked at him, how its tiny paws made no sound against the wooden floor. He felt like a scientist studying a new discovery, and in a way, that's exactly what he was doing. At one point, he took out his phone and searched for animals that resembled Nova, scrolling through countless pictures of foxes, wolves, and even exotic breeds of dogs. But none of them matched exactly. He found himself staring at Nova again, wondering just how rare it was. Nova patted over to him and rested its head on his knee, letting out a soft sound that was neither a whimper nor a growl. something entirely unique. Lucas smiled, running a hand through its fur. You're one of a kind, aren't you? Nova blinked at him, then nuzzled closer. Lucas chuckled, his chest tightening with warmth. Guess that makes two of us. Later that day, he decided to take Nova outside for some fresh air. He carefully wrapped it in his hoodie before heading out into the backyard. The cold air nipped at his skin, but Nova didn't seem to mind. In fact, the little creature perked up immediately, ears twitching as it sniffed the air. Lucas knelt down, setting Nova on the grass. At first, it hesitated, glancing up at him as if seeking reassurance. Lucas gave it a small nod, and after a moment, Nova took a cautious step forward. Then another. Within seconds, it was bounding through the yard, its tiny body moving with surprising grace. Lucas laughed. Guess you needed some space, huh? Nova made a chirping sound and dashed back toward him, its tail, if it could even be called a tail, wagging slightly. Lucas reached out, letting Nova nuzzle against his palm. You really are something special. Just then, a voice called out, Lucas! Lucas turned to see his best friend Evan leaning over the fence. Dude, what is that? Lucas hesitated. He hadn't told anyone about Nova yet. He hadn't been sure how to explain it. But Evan had been his best friend since kindergarten. If anyone would understand, it was him. It's kind of a long story, Lucas admitted. Evan hopped the fence easily and landed in the yard. His eyes widened as he got a closer look at Nova. That's not a dog. Lucas sighed. Yeah, I know. Evan knelt down, holding out a hand. Nova sniffed it cautiously before letting Evan stroke its fur. Dude, where did you find this thing? Lucas told him everything, from the alleyway to the vet visit to the strange discovery that Nova wasn't any known species. Evan listened, his face unreadable. That's insane, he said when Lucas finished. Like actually insane, but also kind of cool. Lucas grinned. Right? Evan studied Nova again. You think anyone else knows about it? Like, officially? Scientists or something? Lucas's stomach tightened at the thought. I don't know, but I don't want Nova to end up in some lab. Evan nodded. Then we keep this between us. Lucas let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Thanks, man. Evan grinned. Hey, you always wanted a pet. You just ended up with something way cooler than a regular dog. Lucas laughed, watching as Nova darted across the yard. Yeah, I guess I did. Lucas and Evan sat on the grass, watching Nova explore the yard with a mix of curiosity and excitement. The way it moved fascinated them, so light on its feet, darting from one place to another like it barely touched the ground. It had this strange combination of a fox's grace and a puppy's playful energy, but there was something else about it. Something unplaceable. Evan whistled lowly. Dude, this thing is like next level. I don't think I've ever seen anything move like that. Lucas nodded. I know, it's weird, right? It looks kind of like a puppy, but at the same time it's like it's something else. Nova suddenly stopped mid-run and perked up, its ears twitching. It turned its head toward the far side of the yard, as if listening for something. Then in a flash, it bolted toward the fence and leaped, higher than Lucas had ever seen a small animal jump. Whoa! Evan shouted. Nova landed on the wooden fence and balanced there effortlessly, its tail flicking. For a moment, Lucas was too stunned to react. He had seen dogs jump high before, but Nova wasn't built like a dog. It wasn't supposed to be able to do that. Nova, get down, Lucas called, his voice tight with panic. Nova tilted its head at him, but obeyed, springing back onto the grass as if gravity meant nothing. It padded over to Lucas, rubbing its head against his leg, as if nothing unusual had happened. Lucas exhaled in relief, his heart still pounding. Evan gaped at Nova, then at Lucas. Okay, yeah, that's definitely not a dog. Lucas ran a hand over his face. I have no idea what's going on. The vet said it wasn't anything recognized, but this is crazy. Evan nodded slowly. You should probably keep an eye on it when it's outside. If it can jump fences like that, it could run off. Lucas swallowed hard. The thought of losing Nova made his stomach twist. Yeah, you're right. I'll have to be careful. As if sensing his concern, Nova let out a soft chirping sound and curled up beside him. Lucas smiled and stroked its fur, letting the warmth of its small body calm him down. Evan sighed, shaking his head. Man, I don't even know what to say. But one thing's for sure, you can't tell anyone else about this. If word gets out, people are going to want to take it. Scientists, the government, maybe even people who just want a rare pet. Lucas nodded. He had already been thinking the same thing. I won't let anyone take Nova. It belongs here. Evan patted his shoulder. Then you better be careful. This thing is one of a kind, and that means people are going to want it. Lucas spent the rest of the afternoon making sure Nova stayed close. He didn't want to take any risks. He kept the backyard gate locked and checked the fence just in case there were any weak spots Nova might be tempted to climb over. If he was going to keep this secret, he had to be smart about it. That night, as he lay in bed, Nova curled up beside him. He stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. Everything had changed in just a few days. He had gone from a normal kid with a normal life to someone hiding a creature that wasn't supposed to exist. And now he had to figure out how to keep it safe. One thing was clear. This was only the beginning. The next morning, Lucas woke to Nova curled up tightly against his chest. It had nestled itself between the folds of his blanket, its body warm and its breathing slow. He smiled and gently scratched its head. Morning, buddy. Nova let out a soft chirp-like sound before stretching its small limbs. Lucas glanced at his clock. It was still early, too early for school, but late enough that he couldn't go back to sleep. He reached for his phone and checked the messages Evan had sent him the night before. Evan, dude, I still can't believe that thing can jump like that. Evan, you gotta be careful, man. Evan, also we should test what else it can do. Lucas sighed, shaking his head. Evan always wanted to push limits. He typed back. Lucas, we need to make sure it's safe first. I don't want to freak it out. Evan responded almost immediately. Evan, yeah, but seriously, it could have other abilities. If it can jump like that, what else can it do? Lucas glanced down at Nova, who was watching him with its bright eyes. He didn't want to turn Nova into some kind of experiment. But Evan wasn't wrong. There was clearly more to Nova than met the eye. Later that morning after breakfast, Lucas let Nova into the backyard again. This time, he kept a much closer watch, standing by the fence with his arms crossed. All right, Nova, he murmured. What else can you do? Nova sniffed the air, its ears twitching again. Then, with shocking speed, it darted across the yard, climbed a tree in mere seconds, and leaped from branch to branch as if it were weightless. Lucas's jaw dropped. That's insane, he muttered under his breath. Nova finally landed gracefully on the grass and trotted over to him, tilting its head as if waiting for approval. Lucas knelt down and scratched behind its ears. You really are something else, aren't you? Just then he heard the back door open. His mom stepped out, a cup of coffee in her hand. Lucas, what are you doing out here? He turned quickly, shielding Nova from view. Just getting some fresh air. She narrowed her eyes. You're not up to something, are you? He forced a laugh. Nope, just playing with Nova. His mom sighed. All right, just make sure you're not late for school. Lucas nodded quickly as she went back inside. He let out a breath and turned to Nova. That was close. Nova let out a small noise, almost like a chuckle. Lucas shook his head. I swear, sometimes you understand more than you let on. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Lucas barely paid attention in class, his mind constantly drifting back to Nova. What was it really? Where had it come from? And more importantly, was anyone looking for it? During lunch, Evan leaned in across the table. We need a plan. Lucas frowned. For what? Evan grinned. To figure out what Nova is. I mean, think about it. This is huge. It could be a totally new species. We could make history. Lucas sighed. I don't want Nova to become some science experiment. Evan held up his hands. I get it, but we need to at least know what we're dealing with. Lucas hesitated, then nodded. All right, but we do it my way. No scaring Nova. Evan smirked. Deal. Lucas wasn't sure if this was a good idea, but he knew one thing. He had to protect Nova, no matter what. Lucas spent the rest of the day on edge, thinking about what Evan had said. The idea of testing Nova's abilities unsettled him. He didn't want to treat it like some science experiment, but deep down he knew Evan was right. If Nova had abilities beyond what they had already seen, they needed to know. If nothing else, it would help Lucas keep it safe. After school, he rushed home, hoping to spend more time with Nova before his parents got back from work. As soon as he stepped through the front door, he dropped his backpack and hurried up the stairs to his room. "Nova?" he called softly, pushing the door open. He spotted Nova curled up on his bed, but something was off. It was trembling slightly, its small frame rising and falling with quick, uneven breaths. Lucas's stomach twisted in concern. He rushed over, sitting beside it. "Hey, what's wrong?" Nova opened its eyes, and for the first time, Lucas noticed how dull they looked. Usually they gleamed with an almost unnatural brightness, but now they seemed faded, like a light struggling to stay lit. Lucas hesitated before reaching out, running a hand over Nova's fur. It felt warmer than usual. "You're burning up," he murmured, his heart hammering. He had no idea what to do. He didn't even know what kind of creature Nova was, let alone how to help it when it was sick. His mind raced. Should he take Nova back to the vet? No, that was too risky. If they ran more tests, they might insist on keeping it. He couldn't let that happen. But he also couldn't just sit here and do nothing. A knock at his window made him jump. He turned to see Evan standing outside on the roof, motioning for him to open the window. Lucas scrambled over and unlatched it, letting Evan slip inside. "Dude, I had to climb up the drain pipe to avoid your mom. What's—" Evan's words trailed off as he spotted Nova. "Whoa, what's wrong with it?" Lucas shook his head. "I don't know, it's sick or something. It feels hot. I think it has a fever." Evan frowned and crouched beside the bed. "Can animals even get fevers like that?" Lucas sighed. "I have no idea, but I need to help it." Evan rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, let's think. What do you do for a dog when it's sick?" Lucas chewed on his lip. "Keep it hydrated, let it rest, maybe try to bring its temperature down." Evan snapped his fingers. "Right, so let's start with water." Lucas nodded and rushed downstairs, filling a small bowl with cool water before bringing it back up. He set it in front of Nova, gently nudging it. "Come on, buddy, try to drink." Nova stirred weakly and leaned forward, lapping at the water a few times before resting its head again. Lucas let out a breath. At least it was drinking. Evan sat back on his heels. "Maybe it's just exhausted. I mean, it was doing all that crazy jumping yesterday. What if that took a toll on it?" Lucas considered that. "Maybe, but it wasn't acting tired last night. This came on fast." Evan was quiet for a moment. "You don't think someone did something to it, do you?" Lucas stiffened. "What do you mean?" Evan hesitated. "I mean, what if someone's looking for it? What if they did something to track it down?" A chill ran down Lucas's spine. The thought had been lingering in the back of his mind ever since the vet had confirmed Nova wasn't a normal animal. If Nova wasn't supposed to exist, then where had it come from? And if someone was looking for it, what would they do if they found it? He shook his head, forcing the thought away. "We don't have proof of that. Right now, I just need to focus on helping Nova get better." Evan nodded. "All right, I'll stay and help." The two of them spent the next few hours keeping an eye on Nova, trying everything they could think of to keep it comfortable. Lucas used a damp washcloth to cool its forehead, and they stayed quiet, letting it rest. Every now and then, Nova would let out a small, weak noise, and each time, Lucas felt his chest tighten. By the time evening rolled around, Nova's breathing had steadied, and its body didn't feel quite as hot. Lucas finally allowed himself to relax a little, though the worry still gnawed at him. "I think it's getting better," he murmured. Evan let out a relieved breath. "Good, because man, I was starting to think we were going to have to pull some kind of miracle." Lucas gave a tired smile. "Maybe Nova just needed to rest." Evan nodded. "Probably, but still, you need to be careful. If this thing is that different, who knows what could happen next?" Lucas sighed. "Yeah, I know." As the night wore on, Nova finally started to stir more, its eyes looking brighter again. Lucas stroked its back gently, feeling the tension in his chest ease just a little. Later that night, when Evan had finally left and the house was quiet, Lucas lay awake in bed, Nova curled up beside him. The small creature let out a soft noise. shifting slightly, as if it were dreaming. Lucas reached out and ran a hand down its fur. "I won't let anything happen to you, Tian," he whispered. As if in response, Nova nuzzled against his hand, its breathing steady. Lucas smiled, feeling warmth spread through his chest, but deep down he knew this was only the beginning. If Evan was right and someone was looking for Nova, then Lucas was going to have to be ready. No matter what came next, he had to protect Nova, no matter the cost. Lucas woke up to the sound of Nova stirring beside him. The small creature lifted its head, blinking its bright eyes at him before letting out a quiet chirp. Lucas let out a slow breath, relieved to see that Nova looked better. The dullness in its eyes from yesterday was gone, replaced by their usual deep, shimmering brightness. Its fur was no longer burning hot, and it stretched its limbs like it had just woken from a long nap. "Hey, buddy, feeling better?" Lucas whispered, scratching under Nova's chin. Nova made a pleased sound and nuzzled against his hand. Lucas smiled, but the relief was short-lived. He still didn't know what had caused the fever in the first place. If Nova could get sick, it meant there were things about its biology he hadn't even begun to understand. He needed to be more careful. The smell of bacon drifted into the room, and Lucas's stomach grumbled. He carefully scooped Nova into his arms, wrapping it in his hoodie before heading downstairs. His mom was already in the kitchen, flipping pancakes on the griddle. "Good morning," she said over her shoulder. "You slept in." Lucas sat down at the table, keeping Nova tucked under his hoodie. "Yeah, I was up late." His mom turned, eyeing him. "Late doing what?" She frowned, then sighed. "You weren't playing video games all night again, were you?" "No," Lucas said quickly, "just thinking about stuff." She raised an eyebrow but didn't push. "Well, eat up. You need a good breakfast." Lucas dug into his food, sneaking small pieces of scrambled egg into his hoodie pocket for Nova. It nibbled them eagerly, staying completely hidden. He was grateful his mom wasn't paying too much attention. The last thing he needed was for her to start asking questions. After breakfast, he headed outside, keeping Nova close. The yard was quiet, the air crisp from last night's rain. Lucas sat on the porch steps and let Nova stretch its legs, watching as it sniffed at the damp grass. "All right," he murmured. "Let us see what else you can do." Nova looked up at him, its ears twitching as if it understood. Then without warning, it darted forward and leapt straight up onto the wooden fence. Lucas's eyes widened. Even after yesterday, it still shocked him how effortlessly Nova could move. It balanced perfectly, tail flicking before hopping back down beside him. Lucas exhaled. "You're way too good at that." The thought unsettled him. If Nova could jump that high, could it escape if it wanted to? Would it? He didn't want to think about it. A familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. "Dude, I knew you'd be out here." Lucas turned to see Evan hopping the fence into his yard. "You ever use the front door?" Evan grinned. "Where's the fun in that?" He spotted Nova and crouched down, reaching out a hand. "How's the little mystery pet today?" "Better. Whatever happened last night, it's over now," Lucas said. "But I don't get it. The fever came out of nowhere." Evan frowned. "You think it was normal? Or something else?" Lucas hesitated. "I don't know, but if Nova can get sick, that means it's vulnerable, which means we have to be extra careful." Evan sat down beside him. "Well, have you noticed anything else weird? Any new tricks?" Lucas sighed. Just the jumping, but it feels like there's more." Evan grinned. "Then let's test it." Lucas hesitated. "I don't know, man. I don't want to stress Nova out." "We don't have to push it," Evan said. "Just small stuff. Let's see how fast it is." Lucas glanced at Nova. It was already watching them, ears perked up, as if it was waiting for something. Evan stood up. "All right, let's try something simple." He took a stick from the ground and tossed it across the yard. "Go fetch." Nova bolted, but instead of running like a normal dog, it moved with an unnatural speed, almost gliding over the grass. It reached the stick in a second, grabbed it in its mouth, and returned just as quickly, dropping it at Evan's feet. Lucas gaped. "Okay, that was fast." Evan whistled. "Dude, that wasn't just fast. That was insane." Lucas knelt down, running a hand over Nova's head. "What are you?" Nova tilted its head, letting out a small chirp. Lucas felt his stomach twist. The more he learned about Nova, the more questions he had. Evan nudged him. You do realize this means someone is definitely looking for it, right? You don't just have a fast dog, you have something else entirely. Lucas swallowed hard. He knew Evan was right. Nova wasn't just unusual. It was something the world wasn't supposed to know about. And if the wrong people found out, Lucas didn't even want to think about it. We have to keep this secret, he said quietly. No one else can know. Evan nodded, agreed, but we also need to figure out where Nova came from, because I don't think it just showed up here by accident. Lucas stared at Nova, who was watching him with intelligent eyes. Deep down, he knew Evan was right. Nova had a past, and sooner or later, that past was going to catch up with them. Lucas felt a heavy weight settle in his chest as he sat on the back porch, watching Nova curl up at his feet. The creature was so small, so innocent looking, and yet everything about it screamed that it was something extraordinary. Something that shouldn't exist in an ordinary backyard. Evan sat beside him, absently tossing a small rock between his hands. "So," he said after a long pause, "what's the next move?" Lucas exhaled. "I don't know. What can we even do?" He looked down at Nova, who was now resting its head on his foot, its eyes half-lidded. "I don't want to take it to the vet again. I don't want to risk anyone else finding out. But if someone's looking for it, I don't know how to stop that." Evan rubbed the back of his head. "Well, we need to start figuring out where it came from. Maybe if we can get ahead of this, we can keep Nova safe." Lucas nodded slowly. It was a good idea, but where would they even begin? Just then, Nova's ears perked up, and it lifted its head sharply. Its entire body tensed, muscles coiling like a spring. "What is it?" Lucas asked. Nova let out a low, soft chirp, its eyes locked on something beyond the fence. Lucas and Evan followed its gaze, their stomachs tightening when they spotted movement through the trees at the far edge of the yard. A shadow, Lucas's breath caught. It was gone in an instant, but he knew he hadn't imagined it. Someone, or something, had been watching them. Evan stood up. "Dude, tell me you saw that." Lucas swallowed hard. "I saw it." Nova let out another chirp, then suddenly darted toward the fence, moving so fast Lucas barely had time to react. "Nova, no!" But Nova didn't jump the fence. It stopped just short, sniffing the air, its ears twitching like it was listening for something. Lucas hurried over and scooped Nova up into his arms. Its body was tense, its heartbeat quick against his chest. "It's okay," he murmured. "You're safe." Evan scanned the tree line. "You think someone's really out there?" Lucas's mind raced. "I don't know, but if they are, they know about Nova now." Evan cursed under his breath. "Then we need to figure this out fast." Lucas nodded, gripping Nova tighter. Whoever was out there, they weren't going to stop. He could feel it, and that meant he had to be ready. Later that night, Lucas lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while Nova curled up beside him, sleeping soundly. He couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his gut, the shadow in the woods, the way Nova had reacted, the sense that things were closing in faster than he could handle. He turned his head slightly, watching Nova's small chest rise and fall with each breath. He reached out, gently resting his hand on its back. "I won't let anything happen to you," he whispered. Nova stirred slightly, but didn't wake. Lucas closed his eyes, trying to quiet the thoughts racing through his head. Tomorrow, he and Evan would start searching for answers, because whether he liked it or not, this was only the beginning. The next morning, Lucas was up earlier than usual. The unease from the night before had twisted into something stronger. Determination. He needed answers. He needed to know who had been watching them, and more importantly, if Nova was in danger. Evan showed up at his house right after breakfast, wearing a backpack and a serious expression. "All right, dude, game plan. We need to figure out where Nova came from, and we need to do it fast." Lucas nodded. "But where do we even start?" Evan pulled out his phone. "Well, I stayed up late looking into weird animal sightings in the area. Guess what? There's nothing about anything like Nova. Not a single post, news article, or forum mention. It's like this thing doesn't exist." Lucas frowned. "That's not exactly helpful." Evan shook his head. "Actually, it is, because it means if Nova is connected to something bigger, whoever is looking for it has done a really good job keeping it under wraps. No leaks, no reports, nothing." Lucas let that sink in. So that means we're dealing with someone who wants to keep this a secret. Evan nodded. And that also means if they find out we have Nova, they're not just going to let us walk away. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. Then we have to stay ahead of them. They decided to check the woods behind Lucas's house first. That's where they had seen the shadow the night before, and if someone had been watching them, there might be clues. They packed some supplies, flashlights, a small first aid kit, water, and set off through the backyard with Nova tucked safely inside Lucas's hoodie. The woods were quiet, eerily so. The usual sounds of birds and rustling leaves were absent, making every footstep feel unnaturally loud. Evan scanned the area. All right, let's look for anything weird. Footprints, broken branches, anything that shows someone was out here. Lucas nodded and kept his eyes low, scanning the ground. They walked for nearly 20 minutes before Evan stopped suddenly. Dude, look at this. Lucas hurried over. Evan was crouched beside a small patch of disturbed earth where deep, heavy footprints led deeper into the woods. Those are fresh, Lucas murmured. Evan stood up, following the tracks with his eyes, and they're heading straight for... A sound cut him off, a low, mechanical hum. Lucas felt his stomach drop. That's... Evan grabbed his arm. We need to hide, now. They scrambled behind a thick tree, pressing themselves against the bark. The humming grew louder, then suddenly stopped. Silence. Lucas held his breath. Then, a voice. No sign of the subject, but we're close. Lucas felt his heart slam against his ribs. Someone was out here, looking for Nova, and they were too close for comfort. Evan mouthed, "We have to go." Lucas nodded, clutching Nova tightly. He could feel the small creature trembling against him. He didn't know who these people were, but he knew one thing for certain. If they found Nova, they weren't going to let him keep it. He wasn't going to let that happen. As carefully as possible, Lucas and Evan moved deeper into the trees, trying to put distance between themselves and whoever was searching. Every step felt agonizingly slow. Every snapped twig like an explosion in the silence. When they finally reached the edge of the woods, Lucas let out a shaky breath. Evan wiped sweat off his forehead. Okay, that was way too close. Lucas nodded, his hand still gripping Nova protectively. They're not giving up. Evan met his eyes. Then neither are we. We need to figure out what they know, and we need to do it before they find us first. Lucas looked down at Nova, who was watching them with wide-eyed, intelligent eyes. Yeah, he whispered, before it's too late. Lucas and Evan walked back toward the house in silence, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on them. Nova remained tucked against Lucas's chest, its body still trembling slightly from their close call in the woods. When they finally reached the backyard, Lucas let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That was too close. Evan nodded. Way too close. And if they were that close to finding Nova, we need to figure this out fast. Lucas opened the back door quietly, making sure his mom wasn't around before slipping inside. He set Nova down on his bed, watching as it curled up, its eyes flickering between exhaustion and alertness. He ran a gentle hand over its fur. You okay, buddy? Nova chirped softly but didn't move much. Lucas could tell the stress of the last few hours had drained it. He turned to Evan, who had settled onto the desk chair, rubbing his temples. We need a plan. We can't just sit around waiting for these guys to come knocking on my door. Evan exhaled. Agreed. So let's start with what we know. Lucas sat on the edge of his bed. We know Nova isn't normal. We know it's not some regular lost pet. We know whoever is looking for it is serious enough to be out in the woods, tracking it. Evan nodded. And we know they have equipment. That humming sound? That wasn't just some random guy with a flashlight. That was tech, which means this isn't just a lost dog situation. This is something bigger. Lucas ran a hand through his hair. Okay, but if this is something bigger, why do we have Nova in the first place? Evan tilted his head. What do you mean? Lucas gestured to the small creature curled up beside him. Think about it. If these people are tracking Nova, why wasn't it already with them? Why was it alone in an alley when I found it? Evan's eyes widened slightly. You're saying it escaped? Lucas nodded. What if it got away from them? What if it's running from something? Evan let that thought settle before leaning forward. Okay, So if that's true, then that means Nova doesn't belong to them. It doesn't want to go back, which means they aren't just trying to retrieve a lost pet. They're trying to take back something that doesn't want to be found. Lucas swallowed hard, which makes this even worse. Because if Nova is running from them, it must have a reason. They both looked down at Nova, who blinked up at them with knowing eyes. For a split second, Lucas had the strangest feeling that Nova understood every single word they had just said. Evan exhaled. So what do we do? Lucas looked out the window toward the tree line. We find out who they are before they find us. Evan nodded. And how exactly do we do that? Lucas thought for a moment. They're tracking something. That humming sound wasn't just random. It was part of their equipment. If we can figure out what they're using to track Nova, maybe we can shut it down. Evan grinned. Now you're thinking. Lucas turned back to Nova, his hand resting on its back. But first, we need to make sure Nova is safe. Evan stood. Then we better get started. Lucas glanced back out the window one more time, the shadowy woods stretching endlessly beyond his backyard. He knew they didn't have much time. Whoever was after Nova was getting closer, and he wasn't going to let them win. They spent the next hour trying to piece together what little information they had. Lucas pulled out a notebook and started listing everything they knew about Nova and the mysterious people tracking it. 1. Nova isn't a regular animal. 2. It has unusual abilities: speed, intelligence, possible emotional understanding. 3. It was alone in an alley, meaning it escaped or was abandoned. 4. Someone is searching for it, using advanced tracking equipment. 5. They almost found us in the woods. 6. Nova reacts to them. It knows when they're close. Evan leaned over Lucas's shoulder, reading the list. Okay, so we know a lot of stuff, but we don't have actual answers yet. We need to figure out what Nova really is. Lucas nodded. We need more information, but how do we get it without attracting attention? Evan smirked. We go back into the woods. Lucas blinked. Are you serious? Evan shrugged. That's where we saw them last. If they left any clues, we need to find them before someone else does. Lucas hesitated, glancing at Nova. It had settled back into a light sleep, its small body curled up tightly. The idea of going back out there, of getting that close to danger, made his stomach twist. But Evan was right. They couldn't afford to wait. Fine, Lucas said, but we're careful. No taking risks. Evan grinned and wouldn't dream of it. They left Nova sleeping and grabbed their backpacks, stuffing them with supplies, a flashlight, extra batteries, and anything else they thought they might need. Lucas hesitated before gently placing a small blanket over Nova. We'll be back soon, buddy, he whispered. Stay safe. The woods felt different this time, more threatening. The trees loomed overhead, their shadows stretching long across the ground. The usual sounds of nature were absent again, leaving only the crunch of leaves beneath their feet. This is a bad idea, Lucas muttered, but he kept walking. Evan nudged him. Relax, we're just looking for clues, not picking a fight. They reached the spot where they had hidden before, near the fresh footprints. Evan crouched down, inspecting the tracks. They're deeper here. Whoever made these was carrying something heavy. Lucas frowned. Like equipment? Evan nodded. Probably. They followed the tracks carefully, moving deeper into the woods. Then suddenly Evan stopped. Wait, look at that. Lucas followed his gaze and felt his stomach drop. In the dirt, partially hidden by leaves, was a small metallic object. A black device with a blinking red light. What is that? Lucas whispered. Evan picked it up, turning it over in his hands. I think it's a tracker. Lucas's pulse quickened. A tracker? You mean they put this here to find Nova? Evan nodded grimly. And it's still active. Lucas took a shaky breath. Then we need to get rid of it. Evan grinned. I have an idea. Lucas narrowed his eyes. Why do I feel like I'm not going to like this? Evan pulled his phone out. We don't destroy it, we move it. We send them on a wild chase. Lucas's lips parted slightly. That actually isn't a terrible idea. Evan grinned. I have my moments. Lucas took the tracker from him, staring at the blinking light. If this was how they were finding Nova, then maybe they could buy themselves some time. All right, Lucas said, let's make them chase ghosts. Evan cracked his knuckles. Now we're talking. As they set their plan into motion, Lucas felt something shift inside him. He was scared, sure, but for the first time since this whole thing started, he felt like they had a chance. They weren't just running anymore. They were fighting back. Lucas's hands were shaking as he held the tracker, its small red light blinking steadily in the dark. Evan stood beside him, his expression set in determination. "All right, we need to get this thing as far away from here as possible." Lucas swallowed hard. Where do we even take it? Evan tapped his chin, then grinned. "I have an idea. We use their own system against them." Lucas frowned. "What do you mean?" "They're tracking Nova, right? Which means they think this thing is leading them to it. So what if we leave it somewhere totally random, somewhere far enough away that it buys us time?" Lucas exhaled. "That could work, but where?" Evan smirked. "The bus station." Lucas blinked. "What?" "Think about it," Evan said. "Tons of people, constantly moving. If we plant this on one of the buses, it'll keep moving, leading them in the wrong direction." Lucas considered it. It was risky, but it was also smart. If they could get the tracker onto a vehicle, whoever was searching for Nova would waste time chasing it instead of closing in on them. "Okay," Lucas said, "let's do it." They hurried back to the house, slipping inside as quietly as possible. Nova was still asleep on the bed, its small body rising and falling with each breath. Lucas hated leaving it behind, but this was the only way to keep it safe. "Stay here, buddy," Lucas whispered, gently running a hand down Nova's back. "We'll be back soon." Evan was already at the window. "We should take our bikes. It'll be faster." Lucas nodded and grabbed his jacket before they slipped out the back door. They wheeled their bikes down the street before hopping on, pedaling toward the bus station as fast as they could. The city was alive with late-night traffic, the glow of streetlights bouncing off the pavement. Lucas's heart pounded in his chest, but he focused on the task at hand. They had to be quick. They reached the station and ditched their bikes in an alley nearby. The station was busy, people coming and going, some carrying luggage, others just waiting. Evan scanned the area. "We need a bus that's about to leave. We can't risk it sitting here too long." Lucas spotted one near the end of the platform, the driver already closing the luggage compartments. "That one." They hurried over, trying not to look suspicious. Evan pulled the tracker from his pocket, hesitating only a moment before slipping it into an open bag left unattended near the luggage compartment. Then without a word, they turned and walked away, forcing themselves to act casual. They didn't stop until they were back in the alley, breathless. Lucas checked his watch. "When does that bus leave?" Evan peeked around the corner. "Right now." Lucas followed his gaze. Sure enough, the bus was pulling away from the curb, merging into traffic. The tracker was on the move. Evan grinned. I'd love to see their faces when they realized they'd been tracking someone's suitcase across the state. Lucas exhaled, tension finally leaving his body. Let's just hope it gives us enough time. They hopped back on their bikes, riding toward home with renewed urgency. They had done what they could. Now they just had to hope it was enough. As they rode, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every time they passed under a streetlight, he glanced at the shadows, half expecting to see figures moving within them. "Do you think they're still close?" Lucas asked. Evan kept his eyes on the road. Hard to say, but if they really are tracking Nova, it won't take them long to figure out they've been tricked. Lucas bit his lip, which means we don't have much time before they come back. They reached Lucas's house and carefully stashed their bikes before slipping inside. Nova was still curled up on the bed, but as soon as Lucas entered, it lifted its head, blinking up at him with those intelligent eyes. Lucas sat beside it and stroked its fur. "We bought some time, buddy, but we need to be ready." Evan collapsed onto the desk chair, rubbing his face. "All right, we got rid of the tracker. Now what?" Lucas took a deep breath. "Now we figure out where Nova came from. If we don't, we'll always be running." Evan groaned. "Easier said than done. It's not like there's a database for mysterious creatures." Lucas pulled out his laptop. "Maybe not, but there are places on the internet where people talk about things like this. Unexplained sightings, weird occurrences. We have to start somewhere." Evan leaned over as Lucas typed into the search bar. "Mysterious animal sightings near me." The results weren't promising. A few reports of strange lights in the sky, An old story about a mutant coyote someone claimed to have seen years ago, and some conspiracy theories that didn't seem useful. Lucas sighed. Nothing. Evan drummed his fingers on the desk. Try expanding the search. Maybe look at missing research animals or something. Lucas nodded and tried again. This time, a few more interesting results popped up. One article in particular caught his eye. Government lab accident leads to missing test subjects, he read aloud. Officials deny claims of unaccounted for animals. Evan straightened. That sounds suspicious. Click on it. Lucas opened the article. It was from 6 months ago, talking about a facility just outside of town. According to the report, there had been a containment breach, but officials claimed no animals had escaped. You really believe that? Evan muttered. Of course they'd say that. Lucas scrolled further. No details on what kind of research they were doing, just vague language about classified projects. But if something got out, they both turned to look at Nova, who was watching them quietly from the bed. Evan whistled. So, you're telling me we might be harboring some kind of government experiment? Lucas exhaled. I don't know, but if Nova came from this place, that means they aren't just some random scientist looking for a lost pet. These people are serious, and they'll do whatever it takes to get Nova back. Evan leaned back. That means we have to find proof. If we can figure out exactly what they were doing, maybe we can expose them before they get to us. Lucas nodded, feeling a spark of determination. We go to that facility. We find out what they're hiding. Evan blinked. Wait, what? I meant research more online. I didn't mean actually go there. Lucas stood up. Evan, we don't have time. They're already looking for us. We need answers. And we need them now. Ivan groaned. This is how people in movies get caught, you know. Lucas smirked. Then we better not get caught. Nova let out a soft chirp, almost as if it approved of the plan. Lucas reached out and scratched behind its ears. Don't worry, buddy. We're going to figure this out. Evan sighed. Right, fine, but if we get arrested for trespassing, I'm blaming you. Lucas grinned. Deal. As they started planning, Lucas knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about keeping Nova safe anymore. This was about uncovering the truth. And no matter what it took, he was going to find it. Lucas and Evan stood at the edge of the woods, the darkness pressing in around them. The air felt heavier now, as though the forest itself was warning them not to go any farther. Lucas tightened his grip on the small flashlight in his hand. You ready for this? He asked quietly. Evan hesitated. I mean, not really, but what choice do we have? They exchanged a look, then stepped forward, the crunch of leaves under their feet breaking the silence. The facility they were looking for wasn't marked on any map. The article they'd read had only mentioned that it was a few miles beyond the outskirts of town, and if the containment breach was real, then they were about to walk into the heart of a very dangerous situation. Nova was back at Lucas's house, secured in a small corner of his room. Lucas had hated leaving it behind, but this was too risky. If they got caught, at least Nova would still be safe. For now, the deeper they went, the harder it was to see. Lucas's flashlight cast a thin beam that barely pierced the darkness. Every shadow seemed to shift and move, making his skin prickle. He kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting to see figures closing in on them. You think we're close? Evan asked, his voice low. Lucas nodded. I think so. The article said it was about 3 miles in. We should be getting close. Another few minutes passed before they finally saw it. A chain-link fence partially hidden by overgrown brush. Beyond it, a cluster of low, windowless buildings loomed, their gray walls blending into the night. Evan stopped. Well, there it is. Lucas stared at the fence, his stomach tightening. Now what? Evan looked around, then pointed. There's a gap over there. Looks like part of the fence is bent. They moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the soft ground. When they reached the gap, Evan bent the metal just enough for them to squeeze through. Lucas felt the cold, sharp edge scrape against his jacket as he slipped inside. Once on the other side, the air seemed colder. Lucas shivered, pulling his jacket tighter around him. The buildings ahead were eerily silent. No lights, no guards, no signs of life. This is creepy, Evan muttered. You sure this place is still active? Lucas hesitated. If it's not, then why would they still be looking for Nova? Evan nodded, his jaw tightening. Good point. They approached the nearest building, its steel door slightly ajar. Lucas's heart raced as he reached out, pushing it open just enough to slip inside. The air inside was stale, the faint smell of chemicals lingering. "Stay close," Lucas whispered. They moved down a dim corridor, their flashlight beams sweeping over walls covered in faded hazard signs and peeling paint. The place felt abandoned, yet there was something about it that set Lucas on edge. Evan stopped suddenly, pointing at a door marked Lab 3. The handle was rusted, but the door itself was slightly ajar. They exchanged a glance before stepping inside. The room was filled with metal tables and equipment Lucas didn't recognize. Broken glass and scattered papers covered the floor. On one table, a shattered container lay in pieces, a faint, glowing residue clinging to its edges. "What is this stuff?" Evan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lucas shook his head. "I don't know, but it doesn't look like anything you'd find in a normal lab." Evan picked up one of the papers from the floor. His brow furrowed as he tried to make sense of the faded writing. "It's all technical. I don't understand half of this." Lucas leaned over trying to read it. The words were too smudged, but one thing stood out, a diagram of a small, four-legged creature. His stomach dropped. "That's Nova," he said quietly. Evan's eyes widened. "You sure?" Lucas nodded. The shape was unmistakable. They were experimenting on it. Evan set the paper down, looking around the room. "So this place really is connected to Nova. They must have been making, I don't know, something." Lucas thought about the containment breach mentioned in the article. If Nova had escaped from here, then that meant it wasn't just a random experiment. It was part of something much bigger. "We need to find more," Lucas said. "There has to be some kind of file or document that explains what they were doing." They searched the lab, opening drawers, sifting through the mess on the tables. Most of the papers were too damaged to read, but eventually Lucas found a folder wedged under a heavy piece of equipment. He pulled it out, his hands trembling as he flipped through the pages. Evan leaned in. "What does it say?" Lucas squinted at the faded text. "It's talking about genetic modifications, something about creating a new species that could adapt to extreme conditions. They were trying to make animals that could survive in places where normal creatures couldn't." Evan frowned. "Like what? Space?" Lucas shook his head. "It doesn't say, but it does mention subject trials. Nova must have been one of them." Evan's face darkened. "So that's why they want it back." Lucas nodded slowly. "It's not just a pet. It's proof that their experiment worked." A sudden noise made them both freeze. Footsteps echoed down the hall, faint but unmistakable. Evan's eyes widened. "Someone's here." Lucas's mind raced. They couldn't let themselves get caught. He grabbed the folder and stuffed it into his backpack, then motioned for Evan to follow him. They slipped out of the lab and ducked into a nearby room, pressing themselves against the wall as the footsteps grew louder. A beam of light swept past the doorway. Lucas held his breath, willing his heart to stop pounding so loudly. The light lingered for a moment, then moved on. The footsteps faded into the distance. Evan let out a shaky breath. "That was close?" Lucas nodded. "We need to get out of here." They waited another few minutes before slipping out of the room and making their way back to the fence. Once they were outside, they didn't stop running until they were deep in the woods, far from the facility. When they finally stopped, Lucas leaned against a tree, clutching the folder in his hands. "We have proof." Evan nodded, breathing hard. "Now what?" Lucas looked down at the papers, the diagram of Nova staring back at him. "Now we show this to someone who can stop them." Evan frowned. "And who's that?" Lucas thought for a moment. "I don't know, but if we can expose what they're doing, then they won't be able to come after Nova anymore." Evan hesitated, then nodded. "All right, let's do it." As they made their way back home, Lucas felt a strange mix of fear and determination. They were taking a huge risk, but it was the only way to keep Nova safe. They had started this journey trying to protect a small, mysterious creature. Now they were fighting against something much bigger. Lucas glanced at Evan, who gave him a small, confident grin. They weren't just kids anymore. They were part of something larger, something that could change everything. Lucas tightened his grip on the folder, a spark of hope flickering in his chest. They were going to see this through, no matter what it took.